Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we have a great show lined up for you. John Simpkins is a friend of MTCA. He recently taught at our spring faculty masterclass weekend a few months ago, and our students raved about him, and we see today why there was so much to rave about. He's the head of Penn State Musical Theater. This is another one of our college deep dive episodes where we try to do a snackable audio tour into the various great theater programs around our country. Today with John, we talk about being in the right swimming pool but the wrong lane. We talk about curious artists and having a point of view on the world. We talk about the utopian collegiate experience that Penn State can offer, that safe bubble and supportive audience that Penn State can be. We talk a little bit about young artists as young athletes and Penn State's innovative wellness program. We talk a little bit about building the bridge from academia to the professional world. And John reminds you to do material that excites you as we get into the audition process a little bit. Next up, we have Ellen Lettrick, our MTCA founder, plus a revenge version of the Newlywed Game that Leo and Elizabeth and I played, where Leo and Elizabeth team up on me. So we're looking forward to that as kind of a fun August episode with lots of games in it. But let's get to John Simpkins and our Penn State episode. Well, it is such an honor to bring on John Simpkins from Penn State University. John has a BM from Miami of Ohio and an MA from NYU. He's directed in New York and regionally and internationally. His career is focused primarily on the development and direction of new musicals, including a 15-year collaboration with Tony nominee Joe Iconis. John was also the artistic director at the Sharon Playhouse from 2011 to 2016. And prior to joining Penn State, he was a member of the faculty at NYU. In 2015, John became the head of musical theater at Penn State University, where he's created new initiatives like a new musicals commissioning program and a wellness center for young artists, both of which I'm sure we'll talk about today on the show. Penn State is located in State College, PA. They take small class sizes of 12 to 15 students. They offer degrees in acting, a BFA in acting, BFA in musical theater, a BFA in theater, a BA in theater, and an MFA in theater. John, welcome on the pod. How are you doing?
Charlie, thank you for having me. I'm doing great, having a terrific summer, eager to get back to work this fall. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I do love doing the summer interviews with faculty. I think you're much brighter and cheerier. The weight of teaching is not quite on you in the same way.
I've never looked this rested. I can promise you that.
I love it. Well, let's dive a little bit in. Before we get into Penn State too much, I'd love to hear a bit about your own background and kind of how you found yourself to be in this position. I know we gave a little bio, but tell me a little about the journey to get here to be the head of musical theater at Penn State.
Of course, sure. I, like a lot of people, thought that my first pathway was that of an actor, and so moved to New York, with everything that I owned in a U-Haul truck, just like lots of people do, and just quickly realized that I was in the right swimming pool, but maybe the wrong lane. Did some shows, got my equity card, felt like things were going pretty well, but had this kind of moment that only makes sense. I think lots of times our life choices make sense in the rearview mirror more than they do as we're actually in the middle of lurching from one to the next, but was sort of following my impulses and thought, I don't really enjoy being on stage, but I love helping people make the theater. And I've always loved teaching, which to me, teaching and directing feel inextricably linked in my own preparation, my own brain. And so I started directing and literally kind of didn't look back. Had a colleague who offered me a spot on the faculty at NYU, where I had recently graduated with my master's, and started doing a little here, a little there, and ended up being offered a spot on the full-time faculty, where one of the things that I did was sort of led the New Works initiative there, and sort of got excited about meeting writers and seeing how new voices in musical theater writing might interface with new voices in musical theater performance. And so that was kind of where that began, and was very happily in the middle of my New York journey. I think a lot of times people leave New York because their love affair with the city is somehow over, or just not
Mhm.
as bright as it was when they moved there. I That was not the case for me. I A colleague of mine saw the job description for Penn State, and she ran into my office and said, This looks like you. They're looking for all of this stuff, and you should go apply for that." And I just said, "No, thank you. I'm very, very happy where I am in New York, and doing the things that make the life of an artist who is a teacher and a director and loves both very much." Ended up sort of throwing my hat in for that and coming out to Penn State for an interview, and fell completely in love with the people, the students. And what I didn't really know is that the philosophy of this place of musical theater training aligned really perfectly with what I believed in as a person, as an artist, as a teacher, as a director. So made a big jump, and my husband and I moved out here 6 years ago, which feels like 2 minutes and 100 years all in the same exact breath. And so here we are, and we start our seventh year this fall, and I get back to New York a ton, and still kind of maintain the relationships that I think are valuable and vital to for me as an artist, and also assisting my students in their journey from academia into the profession. So that's a little bit of, sorry to just rehash a little bit of what you read, but that's kind of the journey of it.
It's a beautiful journey. I'd love to hear a little bit about what made you sort of specifically interested in directing new work. So I know we're going to talk maybe a bit about the program you commissioned at Penn State, but what made you sort of latch onto that specific aspect of the business?
Sure. I love all kinds of musicals, and would be very happy, if somebody called tomorrow and had a gig for a show that's been around for 100 years. I would be happy to consider whether might have something to add to that process. But I think the easiest way I would say it is that so many people have already done My Fair Lady
Uh-huh.
better than I would ever dream to do it. That I thought, here are these musicals that are kind of almost like Bambi on the ice, learning how to walk a little bit. And I very instantly became excited about how can I help that journey, whether it's asking questions of writers that are just questions they haven't been asked before about that piece, or whether it's finding a young or new voice to add to that equation in the actor category that might influence the way that these writers work. And I just felt um, like coach of a new project was a
Hmm.
lot more fulfilling to me. I don't mean to take anything away from anybody that would direct 19 Hello Dollies in the same season, all across the country. But for me, I just don't. I don't. So many people have done that better than I would ever dream about doing it, that I feel like my place is to offer assistance and love and nurturing to new works that maybe sometimes don't even know what they're trying to be yet,
Hmm.
and assemble groups of people that can help answer those questions. I'm so excited about it. Also, kind of hand in glove with that is the what I love about teaching
Hmm.
young artists who are in college is that a lot of what we're trying to do is empower young people to figure out where their voice can matter the most in the work that they do. And I feel like when you import them or introduce them into new material that reflects right now in some way, I feel like you're empowering them to do that even more. So to me, new works and teaching college students are completely linked always.
That's almost exactly why I asked the question. It was interesting to hear you say that teaching and directing is inextricably linked. I have heard some directors say, "I don't want to teach. I don't," meaning
Right.
like, "I don't want to teach in the room. I want to like, can you just know how to do this? Like, I don't want to teach you how to do Shakespeare while we're doing the Shakespeare. I just want you to know it so I can be a collaborator on a more equal playing field." But I love that idea of new works maybe needs a little bit more of that nurturing voice in it, the way that you would as a teacher.
And to me, I would say you're totally right, at least in my mindset. And I think I would direct Cabaret the same way I would direct a brand new musical. I would still
Mhm.
ask the same questions of it. And frankly, in the room with the actors, whether that person has been nominated for Tony Awards or won Tony Awards, and we're doing something at a giant summer stock or regional place, or whether it's somebody who's never had one professional job, I feel like I engage the same exact way. And
Oh,
so I don't understand how to do it another way, which is why they're all sort of tied together.
that's so
And
beautiful.
sometimes, actors who have been around for years and years and years are either going to love that idea, or
Hmm.
they're going to say, you know what, I've got my process and I'll, tell me where to be and I'll do the rest of my work. And that's fine too. I don't have any problem with that, but I love the process of it all.
Yeah, it's a beautiful model of a director. I feel like a lot of directors will say, I want to be the person who knows the answer last in the room. So I'm the most curious. I'm asking the question the longest period of time. I think that's really cool. Some directors come in and they go, nope, I know the whole plan. And that's also a perfectly good way of directing. But I think it's an interesting model to
Yeah.
be most curious and most
Yeah.
investigatory.
Yeah. I also think that whether you're 18 years old and just kind of entering what will ultimately be your professional career, or whether you're 80 years old and you've lived that entire journey in your acting career, we everybody's got great ideas.
Hmm.
Just because you've been around longer doesn't mean that you've got a better idea. It just means that you maybe have a wider palette of
Hmm.
experiences. And I think it's all of our job to make sure that the 18-year-old and the 80-year-old can be in the same show together and can respect each other just the same.
So true. Well, wonderful. Let's get a little bit into Penn State and what we think maybe it means to be a Penn State student. I'd love to talk in brief, and if we're going to give a couple sentences, a couple of words of what you think it means to be specifically a Penn State musical theater student for you.
Sure. I would say the most important thing is to be a curious artist who is looking to find something to say and a point of view to have on the world. We
Yeah.
are, perhaps I can also answer that by what we're not. What we are not is a place that is only interested in making your various skill sets better. We
Hmm.
will absolutely help you attain, more in each of the skill set areas that you're looking to improve in. But more than that, to us, what matters is the collision of all that into and around an idea of what is your point of view. And so, what is so great about that with an roughly an 18 to 22 or 3 year old
Hmm.
is that you're not totally supposed to know that yet. And the mess of trying to figure out what you might have to say to the world can collide with the skills that you're accumulating inside the training part of it. And so, to us, a curious artist rather than a skill set acquirer. Both can happen, but we have to have the front forward curious artist involved. And I guess the other thing that I would say is that we operate on a model of kindness and respect and love for each other and the work. And so, again, by describing maybe what we're not, we are certainly not a place. If a young person is really fueled by competing with the person next to them in a way where if you have to step on somebody next to you to get to where you want to be, we're just not that place.
Hmm.
There's a place in, I talking swimming pools and gardens and sandboxes and all those kind of things. And so there's room in there for all of our students to really figure out who they want to be, and there's room for us to celebrate everybody's ideas in the middle of that.
I love that. So imagining I come in as a freshman, I'm a perfect, curious, kind Penn State student. How am I maybe changed 4 years later? Now I'm graduating as a senior, or I'm graduating even afterward. How have I been changed by my 4 years at Penn State?
I hope that those first year students who come in are open to the change. That's the first thing. If you're the more open you are to the ways that your opinions and your DNA can actually alter by these 4 years, I think the more you will actually take advantage of the 4 years. I don't mean to dodge your question, but to me, the end of the fourth year, looking backwards, I hope that in our classes there are 12 different answers to that question. I
Hmm.
hope that I hope that for some people, I hope they come in. I'm speaking in sort of scrapbooks of the past. So I hope some of the people who come to Penn State leave, perhaps enter thinking that they are a singing actor and dance is something they're going to try to avoid in their life.
Hmm.
I hope they leave posting dance videos on Instagram. I hope that people who come in thinking that they want to be a singer, dancer, actor in a particular style or type of musical, I hope they leave with a much wider palette of what that is. So um, I suppose I want 12 different answers to those questions about how that journey went. I mean, part of what I love about the size of our program is that with the number of faculty and students we have, we're all able to kind of help curate that one particular journey. So if
Hmm.
along the way a student says, "Oh, I just realized that I want to write songs too," well, then the answer is great. How can we help? and what vehicle can we help create for you to express your art that way? Because guess what? That's all going to help impact the way that you actually are acting and singing as well. So I'm probably giving you an answer that is too abstract for a lot of people, but I truly hope that everyone's story is what is most important to them.
It's a great answer, abstract or not. And it's kind of cool now. You said the longest 6 years, which of course makes sense in a number of ways, but you also now have got to watch entire classes graduate. So that's a kind of an exciting moment as a new head of a program to be able to go. And I know you're not brand new, but in terms of going, I've now taken and then graduated a whole class. It feels like a special milestone.
It is, and I feel like I'm not alone in saying this. The alumni populations of all of the musical theater schools, I think, are different than if you go somewhere and major in engineering. I think
Hmm.
when you major in musical theater and get a BFA at lots of places in the country, I think you graduate into a group of people, a group of alumni who are excited for you to join them and have your school on your or their school on your resume. And I
Hmm.
think for us, what's been particularly exciting for me is now that I have 6 graduating classes, I can start to watch their professional journeys and start to take enormous pride in their professional journeys, as well as the people I don't know as well who I've had a chance to meet who are, graduated long before that. Penn State has I believe the university has the largest alumni association in the country
Hmm.
as a university, and so there is this sort of spirit of attending Penn State that carries with you in your professional life. And in musical theater, that community is so small and so helpful that there's always a couch to crash on, and there's always somebody who will introduce you to their agent or a writer they love or a
Hmm.
director that they've been working with. That all exists, and it's been fun for me to see all of that very specifically happen.
Well, that dovetails so nicely into, my next question is outside of the theater program, just what does Penn State offer a student who might be looking at as a larger college, maybe outside of the even acting and musical theater program?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, the best way I can say it is Penn State truly is a place that has been built to be the as utopian collegiate experience as you can possibly have. So from the rolling hills to the over 1,000 clubs that you could join to the football games on Saturdays in the fall, which are truly unlike any other environment that I have ever seen in my life, and aren't only about football. They're about community, and they're about celebrating this place that we all love and want to continue. So I would say anything that you would like your collegiate experience to be in terms of clubs, minors, possibilities. Penn State is likely to be able to help you with that. And so we say to our BFA musical theater students as they come in, look, get your feet grounded in musical theater. It's a very specific path to get a BFA in musical theater. This is not a general degree. it's a
Hmm.
it's a laser focused degree. However, the last thing that I would ever want is for people to not be able to take advantage of this place and what it has to offer you and what it has to help you grow as a young person. It is college, true college. And what we perhaps lack in the urban backdrop of a big city, we more than make up for in this slightly utopian place to train that always has a bed, a landing ground of positivity underneath you. There's nothing, nobody who we don't want to come and see our shows is coming to see our shows.
Hmm.
You're safe in our world for these 4 years.
Mm. And why would you find that students don't choose your school? So now you've had some classes where you've accepted, and now students maybe say, I have multiple options. And why would you find them maybe saying no to Penn State?
I think what a great question. I think only the student knows that, but I can tell you what I think I've observed, which is that the students who end up not responding to us after a thorough investigation are likely people who are really craving a city
Mm.
in which to do their education, so that they can go to class during the day and experience the culture and offerings that particular city has to offer. Um, Obviously no value judgment either way on that. I taught at NYU, which has the best city in the world, in my opinion, as its backdrop. And I loved that experience. And now
Hmm.
I'm here, which has this idyllic sort of country setting where college, people wear Penn State gear every day here, which is a very different experience for me coming from the city to see the kind of school pride. And so if that's not in the cards for somebody, then we're
Mhm.
probably not a place where they would like to go, because you do have to sort of buy what each university is selling. And if that's
Mhm.
an urban city fast paced environment in addition to and alongside your schooling, we would not be for you.
Mm.
Uh, we're a deeply process oriented place in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania.
Mhm. I'd love to hear a little bit about. I know we talked a bit about the new musical initiative, but I'd love to hear a little bit about the wellness. We can talk more about the new musicals as well, but about the wellness center that you sort of started. I know MTCA just started offering wellness coaching as well. It's a something that is
Yes.
coming more and more into the zeitgeist. But I'd love
Yeah.
to hear a little bit about your impetus behind starting it and sort of what you do with that.
Sure. My entire life that is not musical theater has been about athletics. I have been a sports and a musical theater person my entire existence, which I realize those are not necessarily best friends all the time.
They fit well on
You're
this
you're
pod, John. Well on this pod. We love talking about
good.
it.
Good. I love it. There was a long time that I thought I was going to be a sports broadcaster, and
Hmm.
actually started my undergrad journey as a broadcast journalism major, and
Hmm.
quickly realized that that could be my passionate hobby, but this was going to be my actual occupation. Um, so I athletics in colleges like Penn State across the country, Division I, big schools, have figured this out years ago with their athletes, with their student athletes. The idea that in a high pressure situation where a lot of eyes are on you and you're being quote unquote judged on your play on the field or on the court, that there needs to be some services provided to you so that you can actually cope with that superhuman kind
Hmm.
of expectation of you. Um, I've always seen it in athletics. I've always wondered why musical theater did not follow quickly behind, because I
Hmm.
see such parallels between what we're asking young artists to do and what college athletics are asking young athletes to do. I think
Hmm.
they're very similar, not only in the way you use your body, but in the pressure situations that are on you to deliver.
Hmm.
Um, and so what better place than a place like Penn State, who has a spirit of collaboration and love, and also resources beyond any that I've seen at any college that I've observed. And so I got here and I started asking every coach that I could find if they would have lunch with me. And I would, at the lunch, I would to those to those who regret saying yes to me, I would sit with them and say how could you, or how did you build some of your wellness services for your student athletes? And I very quickly got into rooms of people that I never knew existed that sort of built the athletic programs approach to this. So a good idea and a collaborative energy turned into what we now have 8 providers in our wellness center. So we have 4 psychologists who are there to assist our students in their mental health journey. Everything is completely anonymous, as it would be if you went to the student health center. But
Hmm.
what's great about it is that our psychologists start to understand, like athletics, like sports psychologists do, they
Hmm.
start to understand what are the stressors that arrive most commonly as you pursue your BFA in musical theater. What that lets us do as faculty is learn a bit about those from our psychologists, not attached to any human, but learn about what those are so that we can continue to tweak the curriculum to see if we can provide altered experiences so that we can take some pressure off of a student. And in a lot of cases, they are visiting those psychologists in order to move through their collegiate experience that has nothing to do with musical theater. So, in addition to the psychologists that we have, which are again all completely confidential for our students, we also have a nutritionist. She has come up with things that she's modeled after athletics that we call fueling stations. The idea being that if you're a student who is about to go into a heavy dance class and breakfast is 3 hours ago and lunch is
Hmm.
not until after class, there are some nutritional choices you can make in order to not only perform optimally for that class, but then also recover from that high stress physical exertion after the class. So what we do is provide not only the information, but we provide the nutritional the food and the drink that the students need in
Hmm.
order to prepare for and recover from those classes. Our nutritionist is available to our students for one-on-ones. We do a lot of conversations in groups or small groups. Sometimes the students opt in or out to these, talking about cooking on a budget, cooking for the week. What do eating disorders do in our industry, and how can
Hmm.
we sort of stay away from those and maintain our best sort of approach to nutrition, and how to navigate the career. We have so that's nutrition and mental health. We also have a physical health sort of branch of our wellness center that includes a physical therapist and a medical doctor. Both work in tandem with each other to in both preventative and recuperative care. We want to make sure, in my earlier example, we want to make sure that if somebody twists an ankle as a dancer in a show, we want to make sure that we get them to someone who knows that ankle, the same
Hmm.
way that the sports medicine people know the ankle of a football player who goes down on Saturday afternoon in Beaver Stadium. So that's the physical health, and then we have a vocal health wing as well. We have a place called the Voice Center, which is at our medical facility in Hershey, and it's run by a former singer, and he and his team work with us. All of our students get a baseline scope when they arrive, and that's a way we can look back and also do some vocal health classes along the way as well. So it's a fairly comprehensive way in which we can basically say, "Hey, musical theater students, here's your journey, right? This straight ahead journey. When you need anything else that's around that, right? When you need a service or a psychologist, just here they are." And
Hmm.
if our students take advantage of these services in different ways, and we don't ever know who's taking advantage of what because we don't want to know.
Hmm.
All we get is data from our providers so that we can continue to increase the effectiveness of that. So our hope is that once they leave Penn State, they can go to New York and find ways in which they can already have a leg up on their wellness habits. Because if you just are heading to New York without a way of of taking care of yourself, I think you've got a taller hill to climb
Hmm.
when you get there.
It's so true. Well, it's that's by the way, if that's fairly comprehensive, I want to hear what a comprehensive program is. That sounds very comprehensive. But it
The
also.
one thing I want to do, Charlie, I'll tell you, and this is aspirational for me. The one thing I want to do is I want to keep building a bridge from academia to profession. So
Hmm.
we've got that going right now in our new musicals initiative. I would love a way, and I don't know how this works, but we're working on it. I would love a way for the wellness habits that our students are learning at Penn State to somehow understand how to bridge that to the profession. And if that means we need to find a few people in New York to really partner with, so
Uh-huh.
that we can sort of hand off to them and they will know what we're doing so that they can take it and run from there, because you do need a team. Everybody's well, I envision or I sort of liken a career in musical theater to being the CEO of your own company,
Hmm.
and you've got to have a team for every department, and wellness is a big one. And if
Yeah.
we can help you build the team, then we should.
Yeah, I can imagine that learning lessons within a beautifully structured environment, and then going off and bartending till 2 a.m. makes some of
Right,
those same choices a little harder. Of going, where's my wellness station? Where's my healthy food before I go
right,
to bed?
right. Where's my protein bar?
Exactly. But it's so. I mean, it's so innovative, and it just feels like the same way to make an athletics analogy. A couple teams started doing that however many years ago, and it seemed like, what are they doing? This is so. And then every team started doing it after that. Like, this is of course the right way to do things, and this is how all teams should invest in their
Right.
wellness and their psychological health and all those things.
Well, because your performance is going to increase. Not only is your wellness going to be more stable, but your performance in your chosen field is going to increase. It can't not.
Absolutely. I feel like we've hit on it a couple times, but I'd love to get a little deeper into the new writing program that you started as well.
Oh, sure, sure. So we call it a new musicals initiative, and the idea is that we commission writers from New York every year. They come out to meet our third year students, and so they meet them in the late fall, early winter, um, before anybody sings for each other, before the writers play any of their music. We head to a restaurant downtown, and we just eat appetizers all night long and get them to meet each other. And then the next morning, we'll have a it seems to always revolve around food, I guess, but we'll have a big spread the next morning. And the whole idea with it is that I want our third year students and that writing team in a room together, just engaging with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I want the writers to understand the way what's on the minds of young people right now today. I think sometimes people think they know what young people are thinking about and dealing with, But what better way than to sort of get those things out in the air before any topic is
Mm-hmm.
ever hatched. So
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that they meet each other for a couple of days, and then we start work share, right? The writers will play some of their stuff for the students will sing and do monologues and their own work, anything that they want. And after about a 4 or 5 day period, we send the writers back to New York, and the third year students resume their third year journey. Then off to the side, the writers and I are talking about that experience that they had. And the perfect situation is, how does what happened when you were at Penn State intersect with things that you want to write about?
Mm-hmm.
Where is the perfect collision of what you kind of learned and observed and took in from our young artists, and how does that kind of crash into what the things are that you want to write about? And so far so good. We've commissioned 6 of these, and all 6 of them have yielded a great idea that is a merge of
Mm-hmm.
those two things. And so then the writers set about writing their show, and fast forward 6 months or so, now we're starting the students' fourth year, and the writers are then kind of in residence at various points of that year as we develop that show. So there are some deadlines for the writers to deliver material. Zoom has actually been a big blessing to
Mm-hmm.
this process, because it means the writers can join us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then also we bring them to Penn State, once a month for an extended period of time. It culminates in 2 things. We do a concert at 54 Below in January every year that is designed to feature the score. It also has great benefits to get our current fourth year students just an opportunity, a curated opportunity to get up on a stage in New York and do their stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because there are, in fact, industry professionals in that room all the time for them. And then the second piece is later on in the spring, we do a big concert reading on campus. Sometimes that's a staged reading. Other times that's books in hands. Depends on where we are in the process. And then we say thank you very much to the writers. And that's called kind of phase one of the
Mm-hmm.
process. The students graduate having hopefully originated a role, performed some of the stuff at 54 Below, learned how to work on new musicals, which is its own separate skill, as we all know,
Mm-hmm.
and also developed some contacts in the industry. So kind of a win-win for the students. And for the writers, hopefully there is a show where there never was a show. If the writers are excited about continuing to work on that show, we would then talk about producing it on a subsequent season. That would be done obviously with a different group of students, because the original ones would have graduated. So we're now doing that production, continuing to workshop, develop,
Mm-hmm.
curate that musical through the production phase. That's phase two. And again, if that's the end, then that's the end. And if the writers and we are still really happy with each other, then we'll shop it out to some regional theaters or some nonprofits. And phase three would be a world premiere regional or commercial production that we at Penn State would help shepherd and curate. So we've done 6 of these. The first of them was Joe Iconis's piece "Love and Hate Nation," and that one we've been able to get all the way through a world premiere production at Two River in New Jersey, which featured 4 of the 9 cast members were Penn Staters, even in that journey. So talk about proof of concept. It's
Mm-hmm.
working. It's
Mm-hmm.
working to kind of bridge the academic and the professional, for our students and for our alums. We're thrilled for the journey of that show, and everything else is, in process. One of them we're shopping to Netflix and HBO for some movie possibilities, and so it's just been such a beautiful way in which the journey of the student can intersect the creation of new work from writers. We haven't found any negatives anywhere from it. It's just all kind of been working beautifully.
That's so cool. And is phase 4 Netflix? And then phase 5
I
is win a
mean,
Tony? I mean,
yeah,
how
yeah,
many
yeah,
phases
yeah,
are
yeah,
there?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, let's hope that there's all of those things. But I mean, seriously, that's all. What's the phrase? That's all icing on the cake. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that's all. The core experience is this class for those fourth year students, where they
Yes.
get a chance to actually influence and originate a role. It's not like Charlie and John and all of their friends
Mm-hmm.
like making up a musical. It's very much written for
Yes.
these students and what they're up to and what they're thinking about.
It's so cool. I
Yeah.
have one more question about the program, which is just how the acting in musical theater students and trainings kind of intersect with your school. So how does it work if I'm an MT student, an acting student, maybe specifically if I'm on that edge and I've decided to go for acting, but I'm still interested in musical theater. How does that kind of work in your school?
So we play really nicely together. We all like each other, which is nice. I would say to the prospective student who's looking at one program or the other, it would be after a deep investigation of both programs. We think both on the musical theater and on the acting side, we think our programs are so different that a
Mhm.
student would really kind of come down to wanting to do one or the other, rather than sort of straddling and trying to audition for both and seeing where the chips fall.
Mhm.
We think that that's it. If you're on the fence between which program to try to audition for, we think that your research is incomplete.
Mhm.
And keep learning because you will find one that we think is better for you. Now, so that's in the audition process. Once we're inside the program, a couple of things. One, we like to mix the populations for their first acting class. And the reason we do it is because the reason I want to do it on the musical theater side is that I don't want any of our first year musical theater students thinking that acting is sort of like diet acting because
Mhm.
you're in musical theater, or somehow like the acting for musical theater watered down version. Not
Mhm.
at all. So we love the fact that they're a mixed population in that first year of acting courses. Um, all of the productions that happen under the umbrella of the School of Theater. So any student in either program can audition for plays and musicals, and it would not be atypical for a musical theater student to occupy a spot in a play or vice versa.
Mm.
And the faculty, we like each other. And when you like each other, natural collaborations are able to happen. And so I
Mhm.
think our students, they become friends with each other and they do student projects together. We on the faculty side become friends with each other. We do faculty projects together. So it's a really warm environment. I will say, however, there is a bright line between the musical theater degree and the acting degree.
Uh-huh.
And yet we can sort of hop over it for periods of time whenever any of the students want to.
That's really well articulated.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a really quick break. And when we come back, we will talk about auditioning, the Penn State audition. Okay, we are back and we're going to get into the Penn State audition, what everybody wants to hear about. I'd love to just talk a bit about what do you think specifically for Penn State makes a great audition, or specifically for you, I'll say.
Of course, I think for us, we're looking for, this is not going to surprise you based on our conversation already, but we're looking for people who are daring to kind of have an opinion about the material that they're putting in the room.
Mm.
I guess said even more simply, I would say we're daring for people to reveal a little bit of themselves
Mhm.
to us rather than just the skills that they've accumulated so far in their lives. That doesn't mean that we're not interested in assessing the skills. Of course, there is part of that happens, right? But we're also, I speak for musical theater teachers everywhere. We're pretty good at assessing those skills. So
Mhm.
the things that are really interesting to us are when a young person kind of dares to have a strong opinion about their work that
Mm.
you can kind of pick up from what they're doing.
Mhm.
So does that mean that we like age appropriate material? Yeah, where possible. Does that mean that we like people creating dramatic circumstances that have a personal component? Yes, it does. And we're always excited to extract what we think that is. Nobody ever knows. We don't know who you're singing to. We're not in class. We don't have your paperwork. But if you dare to actually bring that close to your own lived experience, as
Mm.
close as you can, we are likely to learn more about you in that room. And that's really, really the thing that guides us the most.
I will ask my student's favorite question, even though it's not always my own. Is there anything you definitely do not want to see in a student's audition?
Um, the things that when you say that, the things that just pop into my mind, which might not be a comprehensive list, but I am not interested in seeing people do a monologue because it has some shock value to it.
Mhm.
The monologues about murder, or the monologues that are just laced with profanity all the way through, the shock value monologues.
Mhm.
I would say the same thing about musical theater songs. We are not, in fact, looking for the person who belts the highest. That's not that is not a guiding principle for us. So why would you choose something that has where everything has to align perfectly for you to be able to sing that note
Mhm.
or that song or execute that piece of choreography? We are just looking for a snapshot of where you are at this moment. And so I would say, when you stray too far off that path and are guided too much by what you think identifies you as a skill acquirer,
Mm-hmm.
we get a little bit less interested.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that we don't love.
Do either of those answers change at all for the kind of pre-screen audition and or any kind of special advice for those dreaded pre-screens?
No, they don't change at all for us. And frankly, for the pre-screens, I can understand how it would be hard not to try to assess your own skills and see, what do I have that might make me appear more vividly or more strongly to
Mm-hmm.
people. And I guess what I would say is what you have is you. And so I think sometimes people look in the wrong place for what they're looking for. So instead of looking for the note or the song choice, the perfect, clever, hilarious patter song that you
Mm-hmm.
think is perfect, but we've probably heard a lot,
Mm-hmm.
is less important to us. Look for the answer in who you are as a person and what you have that's different from what your neighbor has, and then see if you can capitalize on that. That would be the best advice that we could give.
That's great advice. Okay, this is my favorite question now. If you had to estimate it for Penn State, for you, how much of the decision in the room, the artistic decision, is based on the skills displayed? So, like, that ability to see how good of an actor, singer, dancer are they, versus those intangibles of during the interview or in adjustments or the who they are sort of element of it.
Wow. I would say that probably slides depending on the student. Um, but I would say those intangibles that you mentioned are well over half
Mm,
of what's exciting for us, because I like to tell young people, remember, you're not supposed to be ready for the profession yet. That's why you want to come to college. So what we don't need you to do is be at your final callback for Wicked,
mhm,
because what we're looking for is the potential to work for 4 years together toward a common goal. And so it's almost like when you're in uh, PE class in your third or fourth grade, and maybe these are my like demons coming back up, but and the PE teacher says it's time to play dodgeball. So you're a captain and you're a captain, and a lot of times you're picking people that you think would make great team members. And that is a part of this whole process, because
mm,
to us, if I were to zoom way in, our goal is we would love 12 students to join us each fall that are from 12 different backgrounds, that
mhm,
are from 12 totally different experiences, um, skill sets, et cetera, to fold into the 36 or 37 that we already have, so that we can have at any given moment about 50 students around who come from different walks of life and different opinions and different skill sets. And that's the way that your individual journey can also contribute to a group dynamic.
mm.
I think for us to look at skills, once you reach the bar that we feel like you need to be so that you're able to succeed in the difficulty of the journey in your skill acquisition,
Mhm.
once you're there, now it's all about those intangibles.
Mhm. This is one of my favorite questions because it gets such different answers from faculty members. I'm like, oh, I think it tells a lot about the kind of school and the way they look at it, at least the way they look at accepting.
Yeah. Well, such a tricky answer, because there's also this thing in audition rooms, and we all know this, right? There is this thing where somebody comes into the room and you go, "Oh, I like you. There's an immediate, like,
Hmm.
this is somebody I'd like to be around." And then come the skills,
Hmm.
and then come the intangibles, and then come the academic portfolio, and then, it's like that there are some just things that make those auditions more successful.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that leads me perfectly to my next question, which is just so now let's say you do want someone artistically. How does that work with the academics and the kind of school aspect of things? Of course, they have to also get into college. So, how does it work for your school in terms of whether it's in a percentage or the order that it happens? But how does that relationship between the artistic decision and the academic decision work for you guys?
Yeah, so at Penn State, they are two concurrent and completely separate review processes. So um, the admissions office for our college is looking at the academic portfolio at the same time that we're looking at the artistic portfolio. We do not, on the artistic side, we do not review
Hmm.
the academic side. of things because we have a team of professionals that are reviewing that from the
Mhm.
admissions office. So what happens is that when we make our decisions, we send those recommendations to the admissions office, and if there's any reason that they believe we should not accept somebody, they'll come back and have a conversation with us about it, and that conversation can have a lot of different outcomes. Both parties are looking for the student's success
Mhm.
possibilities.
Mhm.
So if somebody's academic portfolio is so questionable that it looks like that young person would not find success at Penn State, then we would follow the admissions office and not accept them. But more often than not, it's us on the artistic side recommending that we take all of the students that we'd like, and them saying, "Oh, that sounds great." And
Mhm.
also, there were like hundreds and hundreds of other awesome candidates
Yeah,
as
you're like, "We
well
know. I know."
academically, and you go, "Yeah, thank you."
Just in closing with the audition section, is there any kind of advice that you would give to prospective auditioners? Maybe they're about to start their audition journey for this year. Is there anything you'd really want them to think about as they look at the whole journey?
Yeah, take a look at the material that excites you, that you would like to put in front of places like ours for admission to college, and make sure that it didn't get away from you somehow. I think sometimes the coaching process can take students a little farther away from their own opinions. I think that the great coaches that high school students work with sometimes are actually leading the student back to themselves, right?
Hmm.
But that's not always the case. You never know. And I would just say take a fresh uh, look at your material and make sure that it is saying something about you that you would like it to say about you, and not just following the advice of a whole bunch of really helpful people.
It's such good advice. It's the thing that I sort of learned through this process is students keep wanting us to like add layers on. Hey, can you layer my? And I'm always like, I'm trying to take stuff. I'm just trying to get those little blocks that are. I'm trying to see more of you. How can I reveal you?
Exactly. And a lot of times and said with love and respect to the people who are about to start their audition journey. A lot of times they are in search of somebody to hand them, if you do this and this, you will get this. And
Mhm.
it is not as clear as that. And so I would say remove the obligation of the checklist,
Yes.
do your preparation, and then make sure that it's you revealing you.
Yes. Oh, such good advice. I want to do a little bit of looking back and looking ahead in terms of speaking to the specific challenges of 2021. I'd love to hear a little bit how your school has changed and prepared to kind of meet this moment, both from the questions around equity and sort of demands for racial equity, but also the demands of a virtual world and some of the way you're talking about with Zoom and the ways things have been a little different this year than maybe they have in the past. So take that whatever direction you want to take it in, but I'd love to
Of
hear a little bit about 2021.
of course. In terms of racial equity, I would say that like I hope everyone is doing right now, inside and outside of our industry, is looking at short-term ideas and long-term systemic change.
Mm.
And so for us at Penn State, we are in the middle of both of those things. We've made a lot of what our students and faculty believe are some really good short-term adjustments.
Hmm.
We are all undergoing periodic anti-racist training. Sometimes that's just faculty, sometimes it's just students, sometimes it's all of us together. We've been able to take what I would call a short term look at ways inside our curriculum that we can display more equity and a lot more anti racist curricular journeys. I could get deeply into that. I'll just give you a couple of examples to illustrate.
Hmm.
We've redone our dance curriculum for musical theater students to now all begin with Introduction to African Dance, and so we're sort of acknowledging West African dance as the foundation of theatrical dance. And so we've made that the sort of required beginning of the journey for all of our students. We have taken a hip hop dance class, which had been an elective, and we've sort of pulled that into the required journey. We have added a production slot each year for our students of color that we refer to as the Cabaret of Many Colors,
Hmm.
that is designed and put together by exclusively people of color in musical theater. We changed the way that we make up the student committee, the musical theater student committee. ensuring representation and equity in that committee. So a lot of that list goes on and on and on,
Hmm.
because we've been, I'm not sure that I would ever say the word fortunate and pandemic in the same sentence, but there have been some things about the time that the pandemic has given us to actually dig into some things that, if you were in full live production and in-person classes, maybe we wouldn't have stopped and
Hmm.
taken the time to actually deal with this. So I would say that the time that the pandemic has sort of forced upon us has given us an opportunity to look at a lot of these things in the short term. And then I think we have our eye firmly focused on the long term. We are reevaluating the entire dance curriculum, making sure that we are decentering the Eurocentric content of it. We're reevaluating the voice lessons, making sure that we are not exclusively recommending white composers, for
Hmm.
instance, be a part of that. A part of that journey, and the probably the most vibrant set of discussions is surrounding musical theater history,
Hmm.
and how are we able to actually unearth some of the conversations about the true history of musical theater in a way that allows for more opportunity and more seats at the table as we continue forward. So those are, I would say, in order to really, we could talk about this for hours, and it would be not even scratching the surface. But I
Hmm.
would say we are um, deeply focused on the short and the long term, the ways in which we can engage with our students in that journey, where there's no piece of this where the students are doing one thing and we're doing the other. We come together for these conversations and for these trainings and for these decisions as we move forward. And I think that we're on a path. We're on at least a positive step by step path toward change.
And then what about the sort of specific virtual component that came this last year? Is there anything that's sticking of that in terms of the way that you teach, maybe the way that you audition? Is anything shifting in the Zoom of it all now that's been introduced to us?
Absolutely. What Zoom theater kind of taught everybody, I think, is
It's
how
not
to get
Zoom
really
theater. I
good.
can't do it.
Yeah.
Not Zoom theater.
I mean, I don't want any of it. I reject it all. But you know what it did? It made everybody buy a ring light, and it made everybody figure out a neutral background, and it made
Hmm.
everybody get good at recording self tapes, right?
Hmm.
So I think what's good about that for us in our curriculum is that now we've got a way of teaching self tapes, and that unit will stay.
Hmm.
We've got a way with, I'll spare you the long version of the story, but inside of our fourth year journey for our students, we were able to engage with some different new pieces of theater exclusively on Zoom. And so that will probably stay.
Hmm.
We're able to encounter more guests and more professional possibilities inside the journey if we don't have to bring them all to Penn State. We
Hmm.
can have somebody actually arrive for a 2-hour Zoom session. Would we rather bring them to Penn State? Yes. If their Broadway or professional schedule does not allow them to come, it allows us to still have them engage with our students. And
Hmm.
so those are just a few of the ways that I think this is going to stick around for a bit. We've put a unit inside of our business class that deals with self tapes and how the audition process is probably changing. And I know none
Hmm.
of us know the answers to this any more than anybody else does, but it does seem like Zoom auditions and self tapes are here to stay. So we want to make sure our students are ready for that, are prepared for that.
Yep. John, it was such a pleasure having you on today. If people wanted to follow you or Penn State on socials, are those socials that you have at your fingertips and ready to throw out there?
Our probably the best way would be at PSUMT, which is our Instagram.
Hmm.
I think that's probably the easiest way for people to sort of find us,
Love it.
and can sort of always get to us through our websites as well. If you just Googled Penn State Musical Theater, you could find all of our email addresses and all of those things. If email is a better form, but Instagram feels like the way the young people do it.
I love it. It was such a pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for the time, John. I really, really appreciate it.
Charlie, thank you. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. And to anybody listening, good luck with every ounce of your journey. It's a difficult one, but an exciting and rewarding one as well. And can't wait to see some of you soon.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to John as much as I enjoyed talking to him. What a smart and articulate man he is, and so fun. It was just such a bright presence in our Zencaster rooms. I just want to do a little bit of a deeper dive on something that we talked about a bit in the interview, which is that idea of like your potential to learn, or kind of the unfinished product that you are as you walk into these rooms. It's another one of those things that I think is much easier said than done. In fact, I think it's very difficult to walk into an audition room open and curious and ready to learn, as opposed to maybe showing off or proving what is right about what you can do. And especially in a college audition room, I think it's really important to remember that these colleges are auditioning students and not the finished products that they're going to be, right? They won't necessarily take the 12 best performances of songs and monologues that they see. We talk about that actually a bit in an upcoming episode with Ryan Quinn, which you'll see in a couple weeks. So, what can you do to approach the room in a place of learning and curiosity? I think it will serve a couple functions for you. Not only will you have a bit more status in the room if you're not always kind of leaning forward and proving, right? Instead, you have some space in your spine that for what is investigated and what is seeing the whole picture. It also helps us to kind of meet the real you a little easier if you're not putting on that mask of going, this is who I am. There's an old sports adage, of course, we're going to make a sports analogy if we can, of two scouts looking at two sprinters who both run a 4:0:40, I mean, they run the 40-yard dash in 4 seconds. One has perfect form and the other one has terrible form. And the old adage goes, well, which one would you rather have on your team? Of course, the one with terrible form, because once you teach them the form, imagine how fast they'll be, right? That is not to say you want to walk into your college auditions with terrible form. That's not what I'm saying. Let's be clear. But just to remind you that from the college's perspective, you want to save room for there to be learning and growth throughout the 4 years. They're not looking at the artist that you are at 18 years old. They're thinking about the artist you're going to be at 22 or whatever the age is that you are when you graduate, right? So they're saving room to say, what happens when I teach this person? Right? That's the way that they're looking, investigating you. Of course, they're meeting the artist that you are at 18, and that's right. But for you to save room and acknowledge the idea that there is space for growth, there is space for learning, as opposed to, I think John said, we're ready for opening night, or we're ready for, the sort of final callbacks, maybe what he said in the episode. That version of it can sometimes make it a little harder for me to go, well, you look pretty done. You look pretty cooked, right? A lot of the work that you want to be doing as you're working on your pieces is going, what is there still to investigate? How much more can I learn? And if you can actually walk into the room and say, what can I learn from this person? It's going to just be a much stronger approach for you, as opposed to going, what can I show off to this person? Well, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more, please hit that follow button. We've noticed that they've changed it to follow on Apple Podcasts. It's not subscribe anymore. Just follow us. Give us a follow. We'd also appreciate it if you were to rate and review us wherever you find us. We suggest 5 stars if you go to football games for the football, and an ironic 5 stars if you go mostly for the costumes. You can also reach out to us with questions for the pod or about the process at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com. Also, don't forget to send us those time capsules, those audio time capsules, if you've been doing them, or keep them for yourselves. But we'd love to hear about how those are going for you. If you're interested in working with MTCA for help with your individual preparation for your college audition journey, please check us out at mtcollegeauditions.com. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, don't forget, right lane, wrong lane, just keep swimming. We'll see you next week.